is not a single but multiple agents distributed right across the fitness landscape that try one thing to search in the global optima and try to escape from the local optima. Of course, the fitness landscape can take in numerous forms, and based on the constraints of the fitness landscape or the general problem as such, we can have multiple kinds of algorithms possible. We'll study a little bit more about the class, and then we'll start off with the genetic programming, that is the next pillar of evolutionary computing. The next algorithm that I take is the biogeography based optimization, or the BBO. I'll have a brief discussion over it. What here an individual represents, it represents a habitat. So there are multiple habitats. The collection of all habitats in this algorithm is known as an ecosystem. So basically here I have got an entire ecosystem. I've got an entire ecosystem, and then there are some habitats that are inside this ecosystem. So based on that, an habitat is nothing but an individual, so it will have a set of parameters. Every habitat will have a certain parameter that will denote a kind of position in this entire fitness landscape. Again, as per what we have been discussing for over multiple times over now, that every habitat is uniquely located. Now, since I use the word habitat, there are two more terms that are added to it. One is known as an emigration rate, and the other known as immigration rate. Now, since the motivation is a habitat, every habitat has some individuals coming in and some individuals going. Every habitat has some species coming in and some species going out. The incoming of species from some different world into this habitat, from some different habitat into this habitat, is known as immigration. And in some cases, where the species they go outside the habitat is known as emigration. Emigration adds new characteristics of the other habitat to this habitat, and emigration carries out the reverse. It transfers some of the characteristics from this habitat to the other habitat. So there's an emigration involved and there's an immigration involved. And if you look at the natural habitat, what happens is that if the place of living in a habitat that becomes very bad, it becomes some kind of bad. So the habitat normally what it tries to do is that nobody comes inside this habitat, and the people of this the species of this habitat, they move out. On the other hand, if the habitat is very good, so more and more species come inside this habitat, and normally people do not prefer moving out of this habitat. So if a habitat is very good in nature, if a habitat is really very good in nature, so what will eventually happen out is that more and more species will come inside this habitat, and lesser species will try to move out of this habitat. On the other hand, if a habitat is very bad, very less species would try to come inside this habitat, more would like to go outside this habitat. So that is what is meant by immigration and immigration. In this case, both the immigration and the emigration are two rates. They are two rates, and the species that I talked about are nothing but these, which are the characteristics of the gene. So into an optimization space, into an optimization domain, if a habitat over here has a high emigration rate, more and more characteristics or genes would try to move out, and lesser would try to come in. If a habitat has got a high immigration rate, more and more characteristics would try to come in, and lesser of them would try to go out. So based on these two concepts, I can easily implement these two concepts over the entire optimization space, and using the same terminology of the generations and the individuals, I can carry forward the implementation of this algorithm. I can carry forward running this algorithm exactly on the same lines that I executed the other evolutionary computing algorithms. So what happens is that the emigration and immigration rates, they can easily be computed from the fitness value. One of them would be directly proportional to the fitness value and the other would be conversely proportional to the fitness value. So I can carry forward computation of mu and lambda based on the fitness value of the individual habitats. That is when I assign these two values to, I assign an immigration rate and an immigration rate to both these, to all of these habitats that are all along the fitness landscape. Now once I do that, I carry forward an interaction between every pair of habitats. I carry forward an interaction between every pair of habitat. So at any time I'll have a habitat I and a habitat J, and I'll see what is the interaction that these two are interacting. For every pair of I and J, I have got some interaction that is possible. The interaction is always carried forward based on the lambda and mu of these two habitats. So for every characteristics, these two habitats, they probabilistically compete. For every characteristic over here, I see that there will be a donor and there will be a receiver. Usually the case that the donor has a high fitness value and the receiver has got a low fitness value, and I see whether the donor, for any characteristic k, it is ready to give its characteristic to the receiver for any characteristic k, whether this characteristic will travel from the donor to the receiver or not. Whether the characteristic individual would get transferred or not. Now whenever I am saying the term transfer, it does not mean that the donor will lose its characteristic. It does not mean that the donor will lose its characteristics, but rather a copy of it will be transferred to the receiver. A copy of the donor characteristic will be transferred to the receiver, and that is how we all move about. Now we look into the emigration and the immigration rates of the donor as the receiver, and we select a random number. So based on this random number, again the generation of random number, that means that the decision regarding the transfer of characteristic is probabilistic in nature. The selection that we do regarding the transfer of characteristic, that's probabilistic in nature. So we probabilistically select based on both these counts, the emigration rate and the immigration rate, whether both the donor and the receiver are ready to exchange characteristic. If yes, then this exchange is carried out for this characteristic k, else there is no exchange that is carried out. And that is nothing but when compared to a standard genetic algorithm that is known as a crossover. That is nothing but a crossover when talked about in general terms of the character, when talked about in very general terms of the genetic algorithm. That is what exactly the crossover is. Now since there is a crossover, we know that there will be only exchange of characteristics, there will be no exploration at the characteristic level. So we need some exploratory powers that in genetic algorithm were done by mutation. So mutation is there intact. This was the crossover, the mutation is kept as it is, and based on both these mutation as well as the crossover, we carry forward the execution of this algorithm. So this was one of the algorithm to study when we consider, this was probably the last algorithm that I will take from the multi-agent domain. Again, not to forget that the single agent systems are also there. There are some single agent optimization techniques that are possible. We will not study the characteristics part of it. Of course, we study only one technique in this domain, in the statistical domain, when we were dealing with the backpropagation algorithm that use some delta or differential technique to compute where the minima would lie, and then it got converged right up to the global to the local minima, and then there was the application of the momentum that extracted it outside the local minima and tried to get it converged towards the global minima. Based on that, we got another technique that we would be studying in general respects this time, and that is known as a simulated annealing. Now this is a uni-agent problem, this is a uni-agent approach, so I have only one agent working in my fitness landscape. Let me say that my fitness landscape is something over this. This is what is the global maxima, and these are what are the local maxima. At any point of time I generate a random solution, or because it's a single uni-agent approach, I'll generate this solution over here. At any point of time I generate a random solution. It's a single agent approach, so there will be only one solution. So let me say that the solution is generated randomly. All I do is that I generate from this solution, I take in a random step at any direction. I take in a random step at any direction over this entire complex fitness landscape. Let me say I took up a space here. If this step results in a better position, then I execute this step. So if this step results in better position, I'll go from here to here. But if this step results in a weaker position, then I have to decide whether to execute this step or not. I need to decide whether to execute this step or not to execute this step. And naturally, I execute this step with a probability. And why do I execute that with a probability? If I execute this step, it can be seen that it will get away from the local minima. If I execute this step, it will get away from the local minima. So that means I should normally not be executing this step. But suppose the step was being taken out when the position was this, and this was the step taken. Now I should execute this step. Why should I execute this step? Because no matter it will take me away from the local minima, it will get me closer to the global minima. So therefore, I need to decide judiciously whether to take the step or not. If I take the step, I'll be away from the local minima, but then the chances are that I might be closer to the global minima. Again, if the step was being taken out here and this step was executed, I'll be away from the local minima, but I'll be away from the global minima as well. Or because it's a fitness landscape, I'll be away from the global maxima, I'll be away from the global maxima as well. So based on that, I need to make a judicious decisions whether to execute this step or not. And what this algorithm states is that let this decision be made on some probability whose value is given by e raised to a minus delta f by t, where delta f is nothing but the difference in fitness level of these two positions, the initial position and the final position on which I intend to be there, and t is known as a temperature. So based on this probability, I execute this step. Based on this probability p, I execute this step. So what happens is that, let me say initially my solution was over here. It took in a random step, this was found, it's a better fitness, so it will execute. It again did the same thing. The next step came out to be this, it's better solution, so it will do. Next time it will generate the solution here, it's not a better step. It probabilistically determined whether it should move or not. The probabilistic determination came out to be wrong, so it did not execute. So it was over here only. Again it said whether I should move or not. I again move. over here. I again move over here. Next time the solution was over here. It probabilistically determined the answer was no. It again tried. It moved up over somewhere over here. Next time again, let me say that the solution moved up over here, resulting in a better fitness. Next time it tried to do, the jump came up over here, and let me say that the same probability happened to be true, so it jumped over here. So like that it will keep on hopping. Ultimately, some point of time it will converge here. There will be no better steps, so there will be a number of negative steps that will be erected. And there will be a number of negative steps. One of them would say that please move. So that time it will hop up over here, and ultimately it will try to move towards the global maximum. Again, that is what is a single agent approach. This is called as a temperature, and temperature is normally reduced along with time. The temperature is normally reduced along with time to denote what the probability of taking of these steps is. To control what the probability of taking of these steps is, we do one thing, we reduce the temperature along with time. And that is when the algorithm has almost converged. To control that behavior, we change the temperature along with time. So based on that, we use this algorithm. One of the major negative aspects of this algorithm is that it's highly prone to get stuck at the local minima. It's highly prone to get stuck at the local minima, or let me say a global maxima over here. But the advantage is that if I have got some very simple curves like this, a multi-agent approach managing multiple agents, it will be very difficult. But if you take an algorithm like simulated annealing, it will straight away converge over here, and there is no local global minima. There is only a local minima out here. There is a cost graph that I have drawn. There is only one local optima or one local minima. So this is very time efficient. This computes this converts into the local optima, local minima very efficiently. Again, from the graphical domain, now whenever I use the term general domain or a graph-based domain, I can sometimes mean that a graph-based domain can ultimately that a general continuous domain can be broken down in some sort of graph-based domain. That is when I take in a step size and I discretize all the various moves possible. We do it numerous times that we break in what is a continuous domain into some graph-based domain, and then we carry forward the optimization task. So the next thing that I take is from the graph domain, that is the hill climbing. Here the approach is only to get stuck at some kind of local optima. So if this is a graph, these are the various nodes and this is how it's modeled. Here I model up every node at a plane such that the vertical value is the fitness value of a particular node. So I take in every node and I plot it up at a level that denotes its fitness value, or let me say it as the cost value. I have taken a minimization problem. The purpose is if I can find out the bottommost node over here. Now this is also a single agent approach. Multiple nodes would mean multiple edges connected in multiple senses. So I am there at any of this node, I am there at any of this vertex that represents my solution. All I do is that I search all the various neighbors of this node. So whatever it is connected with, this is connected to this and this. I search and this. I search up all of these and I find out the vertex. I find out the vertex with the minimum most cost over here. So this is the node with the minimum most cost. I jump from here to here. I again find out all the neighbors, find out the minimum most cost. This is nothing but this node over here. I again find out all the neighbors, the minimum most cost over here. When I go here, I find out all the neighbors, but this is the one that has the minimum most cost. This is exactly the curve that has the minimum most cost. So I do not do anything, I do not move. And when I do not move, I terminate the algorithm. The algorithm gets terminated because no other move is possible. So that is what is sometimes used, that is the general approach of the hill climbing algorithm, again the single agent system that we use. So that was about numerous kinds of searches, numerous kinds of optimization that we all encounter, we all use in multiple domains and multiple problem domains. At multiple situations we apply various kinds of optimization techniques. So that is a brief of all about them. Now the next topic that we discuss is the evolution of genetic programming. What we have already discussed is that the entire paradigm of evolutionary computing would have a number of pillars, normally rated as the genetic algorithms, the genetic programming, the evolutionary programming, and the evolutionary strategies. We have discussed a lot about the genetic algorithm domain. We've discussed a lot about the general genetic algorithm, and based on that, we not only discussed about the general genetic algorithm, or sometimes the simple genetic algorithm SGA, but we discussed a lot more than that. We happen to produce the entire foundations of what evolutionary computing and its general behavior would be. We happen to discuss all the various foundation principles of what the evolutionary computing would be. And again, when we discuss the swarm intelligence and its class of algorithms, of course not all of them are under the class of swarm intelligence, but when we discuss about swarm intelligence, we saw that the work was very simple, where we had to only make in some reference to the genetic algorithm principles, which were at large the evolutionary programming, the evolutionary computing principles. So here we continue the same trend with the second pillar of genetic programming. And we'll see that to a good extent that this is fundamentally conceptualized in the same way as the genetic programming. So what we'll be discussing a lot more about the differences where this technology kind of differs. We'll be mainly interested in the differences of the general genetic algorithms along with this technique known as the genetic programming, and how is it different. Now, apart from genetic that we carry again from the genetic algorithm, the second keyword over here is the term programming. Now, genetic programming has its inspiration from the automated software engineering principles, and it says that can we develop an architecture such that we evolve nothing but computer programs? Can we evolve computer programs so that when given a problem, my computer itself is able to find out a program that solves that problem? Can I do something that my computer, it is able to make program out of its own, and as a result of this attempt to make program out of its own, it solves the basic problem that it has been given. It solves the problem that it is supposed to solve. So as a result, what takes in the inputs from the user, what processes the inputs, and what produces the output, the program, is not written by a human expert. It is rather written by an evolutionary computing technique. So can I do this kind of task? And as a result, what happens is that an individual in this case is not a normal individual. It's not a simple representation of a solution or something, but rather my one individual is a program. So the key term is that an individual that was there in genetic algorithm, here it is a program. A program that solves a kind of problem. Now, this program is normally given a tree-based representation. That means there would be root, there would be some leaves like this, and this is what the general structure would be. And again, that is different from the genetic algorithms. In genetic algorithm, we had a strict fixed length solution. We had a strict solution which had some x1, x2, x3 up to xn, so it was all compact in nature, it was all fixed in nature. Here it can be an entire tree of any format. Of course, not necessarily a binary tree like this. It can, places of it can be a unary tree, places of it can be binary tree, places of it can have multiple children. So what it has is that it is a complete tree that has some non-leaf nodes and that has some leaf nodes. So these are what are the non-leaf nodes, and these are what are known as leaf nodes. So now, normally why do I say that? Because any kind of computer program that even you deal with, it can very easily be modeled in a tree-based architecture. There could have been multiple representation possible apart from the tree, but tree is the most simple representation that would be possible. Tree is very simple, in which I can convert my program to. It's a very powerful representation technique that can hold my program. So this is what the representation is. Now the second important question would be, in genetic algorithm we discussed that we need an individual representation technique, and after that we need a function known as fitness function. That does only one thing, but assigning a fitness value to an individual, and in this case assigning a fitness value to a program, and assuming that it's a tree-based representation, assigning a fitness value to this tree-based representation. So what is the fitness function in this case? Now since I'm dealing with genetic programming, the fitness function is defined by saying that if you execute this program, you'll come to know how well this program solves the problem. You'll come to know how well the problem solves the problem, how well this program solves the problem, and based on that you can assign a fitness value to this tree or to this program. So based on that you can assign some kind of value to this fitness program, to this tree, and hence you can come to know what the fitness it enjoys. Now suppose I am done with my individual representation and fitness function, the other things would go exactly as was the case with genetic algorithm, where we'll have a set of evolutionary operators, we'll have a set of genetic operators, those that will operate not on one individual like this, but entire population of individual. The population term is similar when it comes to genetic programming or the genetic algorithm, it's exactly similar. So we'll do this thing that we would have all the evolutionary operators or the genetic operators being applied over a population of this program, and then what would happen is that we'll apply these operators to generate a higher level generation from a lower level generation, and a still higher level generation from a higher level generation. We'll execute it up again and again in generations, with the lower generation leading to a higher generation by the application of these evolutionary operators. And as a result, we'll see that the solutions, the programs over here, they keep on getting optimal along with time, or they keep on getting optimal along with generations. And towards the end, I'll choose the best program, the best individual, and use it as the program of choice. Use it as the program that solves my problem. So again, a very brief example towards the initial stages that I would take is that suppose the problem was that I need to generate an expression, I need to generate a program that best matches for the program suppose there's a general expression over here. I needed to compute a kind of program that best matches the curve of this equation, of this expression. So ultimately I need to generate an expression whose graph is as close as this, subjected to x1 and x2 between -10 to 10. So that this does not go unbounded, that is a bound kind of graph, and I need to produce this graph. What is written is nothing but a kind of graph out over here, and I need to generate an equation that generates this graph. I need to generate an equation that generates this graph into this solution space that at present would be bounded by x1 and x2 and fx between -10 to 10 and -10 to 10. And this graph would be somewhere around here. Now of course I know the graph, so there's a synthetic example, but that I need not optimize. But suppose that I really did not know what the equation is that bounds this graph, then it would have become a good problem of genetic programming, wherein I need to generate some kind of curve, some kind of graph. I need to generate some equations so that this kind of curve or graph, it gets evolved along with time. So here the problem comes that I cannot use genetic algorithm. I need to model an equation. I need to model an equation, so I cannot use genetic algorithm, and my equation can be of any form. I know that x1 and x2 are the two variables involved, so I can have something like x1 square plus x2 square. I can have x1 plus x2 plus 5x1 x2. I can have some really complex terms, x1 plus x2 plus 3x1 x2 plus x1 plus x1 square, and so on. I can have all these kinds of equations. So how is it that I am going to represent an equation? How is it that I am going to represent an equation out over here? And that is very simple, but using a tree. So let me say that any solution is my equation x1 plus x2 square plus x1, or let me say plus 5. There is a very simple fundamental by which I can represent this equation. I can say it's x2 into x2 plus 5. I start off with my root over here. I try to generate this tree. So it is x2 square plus x1. x2 square is nothing but this thing. I add x1 over here. And then I add 5 over here. And this is the tree that I come up with. It is x2 square, x1 plus x2 square. This one is x2 square. This one is x1 plus x2 square. And this one is x1 plus x2 square plus 5. So any kind of curve, any kind of equation, I can always represent it up as a tree. So this is what I have done by doing this. I have formulated, to solve this particular problem, I have formulated in a strategy that will of course make my genotypic or phenotypic solution to genotypic, but more importantly I have made a set of rules and regulations that will make this tree. And what these set of rules and regulations are, that number one, all non-rooted, all non-leaf nodes, they'll have either a plus or a minus or a multiply or a divide. Now if you look at this, all the operators, that is these four when it comes to general equations, they are the non-leaf nodes. All the operators are the non-leaf nodes, and the operands are nothing but the leaf nodes. So I have made in this rule that all the operators would occupy non-leaf position and all the operands would occupy the leaf positions. These are my non-leaf nodes. My leaf nodes would be of two categories. The first one would be real numbers with signs, and the second would be my variables. So this is the second constraint that I put, that all my non-leaf nodes, they would either be real numbers or they would be variables. The third constraint that I have got is that my plus is either a unary operator or a binary operator. If it's a binary operator, my non-leaf node plus will have exactly two branches. If plus is behaving as a unary operator, it will have exactly one branch. Similarly for minus, my multiply and divide are binary operators, so they have exactly two branches. So this was an example. Plus is having two branches over here, plus is having two branches over here, into is having two branches over here. Nothing is allowed to have three branches. Nothing is allowed to have three branches. And any binary operator can have maximum of two, can have exactly two branches. Any unary operator can have exactly one branch. So I would have a tree like this: 3 into minus 5. This is a valid tree. Or x1 into minus 5. This would have denoted the equation x1 into minus 5. Here minus is behaving as a unary operator, so that's why it had only one branch. All the variables are the leaf nodes, and here the legal variables are only x1 and x2, so I cannot have any x3, I cannot have any x4, I cannot have any y, I cannot have any x7. I cannot have any one of these as the non-leaf nodes, as the leaf nodes. So by saying that there is an individual representation, of course I am not teaching kind of mechanism in which this problem can be represented. I am saying that any problem when you take, you will have a set of principles, you will have a set of rules, or sometimes call that you will have a set of grammar, you will have a set of syntax that this tree needs to follow. And why do we have a syntax? That is because we know that every for loop will have a statement or a collection of statements inside it. I cannot have if condition followed by any general thing. I need to have its counterpart there. So every statement has a syntax in a computer program, and therefore every tree has a syntax over here. A program is valid only if it is syntactically correct. Here also an individual is valid only if it's syntactically correct. And this is nothing but the syntax of this tree. This tree needs to be sure that this syntax is correct. Only then I'll be able to execute this program and find out what the fitness value is. Now we come across a very interesting thing when I take this kind of operation. When I take in this kind of individual representation in a genetic programming technique, there is some very interesting thing that happens. I take in an equation x1 squared plus 2. I take in this equation x1 squared plus 2. This can be represented by this x1 squared plus 2. It can be represented in this mechanism two plus x1 squared. It can be represented by one plus x1 squared. So there are two things that I note up over here. Every problem has got multiple forms in which it can be represented, and representations can be redundant. They can be useless parts. So with this equation I can always reduce this entire complex equation to this equation. This format I can always reduce from this to this. Sometimes what is generated is there is a condition. Suppose it was of this problem. It was a general problem in which a general program is to be executed. So my if statement will have an then part and an else part. Then represented as a tree, then part as a left child and else part as a right child. And what gets executed is a statement called true over here, or a statement called 1 equals to 1 over here, a then part and an else part, and this code goes a lot. Now you then know that whenever you will be executing this program, this part is completely useless. The program will always follow this curve. So based on that, there is a lot of redundancy, there is a lot of useless code, there is a lot of unexpected code, there is a lot of multiple representations for the same problem. All that happens when you work over with genetic programming. And then of course we need specialized operators to solve this, because any one of them is bad. Any one of them is bad, so you need specialized operators to solve these kinds of problems. But this is one of the problems that always happens when we talk about the genetic programming kind of technique. The other thing is, of course, the fitness evaluation. I will dealt with number one, how do we represent a problem. The second part of it, the second fundamental part of it is how do I take in the fitness value. How do I take in the fitness value? Now, for this problem, the fitness value can be easily defined by, let me say that there was an individual I converted it into an equation gx based on all the solving. So if I had something like x1, x2 over here, this I can easily say is 5 into x1 plus x2. Let me say this was my gx. I always convert it into an equation and my fitness value is nothing but fx equal fx minus gx. This is what my fitness value of the individual I is. This is what, for that problem, my individual value would be. If I fx I draw it as a curve, this equation I'll again have it as a curve. What this between these two bounds. So what this denotes is this colored region. That is the difference between the two curves. And of course I'm taking in a three-dimensional structure, so this will not be an area but it would rather be a volume. It would be a complete volume in itself. This is what for that problem the fitness function it denotes. This is what precisely the fitness function denotes when we talk about the genetic programming. So based on that, we have different individuals, so they will basically have different kind of representations. We'll have some very different kind of representation. Each one of them will denote a curve over here, and based on that we can assign some fitness value. What is left for discussion is just the fact that can we develop a set of evolutionary operators. What is left is that can we develop a set of genetic operators that do not work for a strict array representation, a strict binary representation, but that work on this tree-based representation. If I am able to devise such operators, my task is done. Then the conventional genetic algorithm would follow. Then all the conventional genetic algorithm would follow, which is nothing but that I generate in a random population P. I calculate its fitness value. I start over with while stopping criterion is not met. I apply some evolutionary operators to get my population T. For my population T plus 1, I again calculate the fitness value. So it's nothing but the same thing. It's nothing but the same thing. This thing, if I even execute further, is nothing but some kind of scaling that would follow. There will be some kind of scaling that I will be doing. Based on that, I'll do some kind of selection. Based on my selection, I'll carry forward a series of evolutionary operators, which might be crossover, which would be mutation, and which would be some other design operators, let me say an elite, and might be some other operators, and based on that I'll get my new population. So I'll calculate some fitness evaluation of this population, and this loop would recurse. So the entire algorithm is similar. The only thing that I will be doing out over here is that each one of these steps is to be performed on a program. So we've seen how do we generate a population using the same individual representation technique. We've seen how do we assign it a fitness. We are to work over the evolutionary operators part of it, and then the entire discussion over genetic algorithm, it follows completely through for this situation as well. It executes completely through for this kind of situation as well, where I'll have a series of parameters. Again, the selection will be common, that I'll use a stochastic uniform selection. The selections for the scaling also would be a rank-based scaling or a top selection or fitness-based scaling. So these operators, again, they do not depend upon how your individual is represented, but these operators, they do depend on how the individual is represented. So my only work left out over here is that I need to make these operators work over trees. I need to ensure that these operators written over here, they work over a tree-based architecture. So we'll discuss in all these operators one by one. The first operator to study is known as a crossover. Again, to repeat, that crossover is nothing but the exchange of characteristics between two curves, between two individuals. So I have in crossover always I'll get in two individual. one, let's say this, and the other, let's say this. So let me say that there were two individuals and I had to perform crossover between two individuals. The first thing that I do is that I choose points of crossover. The first thing I do out over here is that I choose some points of crossover. Let it be this point in the first parent and this point in the second parent. I choose in some points of crossover. Now what I am supposed to do is that I am supposed to carry forward the crossover of both these parents over these 2 points. I am supposed to carry some point of some sort of crossover across both these points. So I start generating my two individuals. Let me say this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and this is A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. My first parent would be excluding this architecture when brought up over here, and my second child would be this entire architecture replacing this entire architecture over here. So based on that, I'll have that this portion will be cut like this. This portion will be cut like this, and they would exchange. That is what my individuals they become. That is what my children they become. That I'll carry forward an exchange of characteristics from this curve to the other curve. That is how my crossover behaves. So let me generate the child. The child of the new population at 1 and 2 they remain intact. Now the exchange starts taking place. So this entire structure replaces this entire structure. So it would be B, C, and D over here. This entire architecture replaces this entire architecture over here. For the other parent, A is here, F is here, and G is here, E is here. This architecture replaces this and this replaces this. So there is an emergence of 3 over here, a 4 over here, a 5 over here, a 6 over here, and a 7 over here. This is my first child and this is my second child. This was my first parent, this was my second parent. Again, the selection of crossover point may be almost random in nature or based on some heuristics. If you already know how crossover may yield better results, it may be random or it may be based on some heuristics. These are my two children that are generated. These are the two child that are generated. These are two children being generated where the individual subtrees, this is a tree, we call this as a subtree, where the individual subtrees are exchanged. There is an exchange of subtrees across the two individuals, and that is how across the two parents, and that is how these two individuals are generated. It can be seen this was the first parent, this will come from the first parent, this comes from the second, and here this comes from the second parent and this comes from the first parent. So this exchange produces two children. One point may be that an exchange between two parents may not always produce syntactically correct programs. It may not produce syntactically correct children. Over many problems that we work upon with that the parents always result, the exchange always results in the children being syntactically correct, but it may not be true for all types of representation. It may not be true for all kinds of programs. And that is where you need some kind of repair operation to make the program syntactically correct. You may need some kind of repair operation to make the program syntactically, but this is what the general crossover is, and this is what the technique we use for crossing over between two parents to represent two children. Now again, crossover is the operator that is responsible for convergence when it comes to the genetic algorithms. It can be seen that the same thing almost happens over here, except for that the column representation has changed. This represents an expression, this represents a sub-expression, this represents a further sub-expressions. An expression is nothing but a collection of good sub-expressions, and a sub-expression is nothing but a collection of good sub-expressions. So if there is an expression that has got all good sub-expression except for one, and there's another program that has got some good sub-expression and some bad sub-expression, this program tries to exchange its bad sub-expression with the good sub-expression or the other program. It tries that it gives away its bad sub-expression and it takes in some good sub-expression. That is exactly the discussion that we took forward with the genetic algorithm when we were using the terminology characteristics of a person, where the biological analogy was the tallness, the fairness or whatever. The same thing that follows, except for it is re-termed by a sub-expression only in this example or a sub-program in the other general programming examples. It would be a program module or a sub-program module or a subroutine that it tries to exchange good routines with the bad routines with the good routines. Any parent would try to do that, and that is how the crossover takes place. Again, the selection is heuristic. So a good program always interacts with another good program, and that is where these two programs come and they try to exchange their parts. So whatever was bad in this, it tries to replace it with whatever good was in the other program, and whatever was good in the other program, it tries to give it and take in good characteristics to replace whatever bad was there in that program. So as a result, both of them, they try to satisfy each other in terms of the goodness value, in terms of whatever good characteristics they both possess. And since the fitter programs or the fitter individuals are more active, there is a lot of copy of good routines, good sub-expressions or good sub-programs, and the weaker ones they eliminate, they normally die out. That is just like saying that somebody had bad characteristic in genetic algorithm. So the same analogy that follows for crossover in this technique as well, and that is how we work with trees when it comes up to the genetic algorithms. The other operator is mutation. Mutation works only on a single parent. Mutation, it works only on a single parent. So again, in mutation, I would have a curve like a tree like this. I again select a point of mutation. Let me say this. I selected a point of mutation. Let me say this. All I do in mutation is that I delete this amount of curve. So what is left is A, B and C over here. And my E, D and F, they are replaced by a random tree that is either created randomly or based on some kind of heuristics if they are available. So I'll have a 1, a 2, a 3, a 5, a 6 and a 7 over here. I'll have this kind of architecture over here, where this tree is replaced by a random tree. This sub-tree is replaced by a random sub-tree. This sub-program is replaced by a random sub-program. And then of course, if the sub-program is good, by crossover it will get transferred to multiple programs or multiple individuals. If this is bad, this individual will ultimately die off. So that is what happens in mutation. Again, you need to be sure that this subtree is being generated in a way that is syntactically correct. This expression, it needs to obey the laws, the syntax of this tree. You cannot join it anyway. You need to make sure that the syntax of the complete tree is fine. It works, and it is whenever this program is executed, it will ultimately run. And the other last operator that the mutation operator, what we studied here is what is known as an architectural mutation, because it changes the architecture of the program. So this was the parent program, it changed the architecture, that's why it's called as architectural mutation. There's again another kind of mutation operator that is applied, that is called as a parametric mutation. What parametric mutation does is very different from what structural mutation does. It tries to identify some places. The other is called as a parametric mutation. It tries to select in some random points out over here, and carry out a change in parameters. So if it was A over here, a B over here, a C over here, a E over here, a D over here, and then F over here, it would be replaced by a 1 over here, a 2 over here, and a 3 over here. So this is some kind of change in the value of the parameters, and it can easily be seen that both the kinds of mutations are important. Both the kinds of mutations are important. Back into the same example, if I have x squared plus 2x plus 1 that was to be generated, my parent is x squared and I need to generate from this x squared plus 2x plus 1, so there will be some kind of structural mutation. I need to change in the tree structure. It can never attain that format, so I need to change in the tree architecture. But if it was x squared plus 2x plus 5 and I'm so close to it, so parametric mutation will make that x squared plus 2x plus 5 into x squared plus 2x plus 1 that is desired. So based on these two mutations, we carry forward our entire evolution along with the crossover, and again the same analogy, that mutation is more exploratory in nature. It tries to explore the search space, and the crossover tries to converge, it tries to contract the search space. The other operator and the last operator that we get from the genetic algorithm general principles is what is known as the elite and elite operator. It simply does one thing. The elite operator takes in the best individuals of a population. It takes in the best few individuals, normally a very low count, a 1 or a 2. It takes in the best individuals and it directly transfers them from one generation to the other generation. Now it can be seen that my elite operator is not dependent upon the architecture in any way. My elite operator, it does not at all depend upon the architecture of the program, and therefore I can use it similarly in my genetic programming as I did with my genetic algorithms. I can straight away use it to travel the best programs, the best few programs from one generation to the other generation. Now these were the three fundamental operators to be used in from the genetic algorithm domain. We'll study in a few more operators that are specific to the genetic programming, based on which we'll carry forward some kind of analysis of the genetic programming, and that will be what will be the agenda for the next hour of talk.